You walk into a room right after an argument ends. Nobody speaks, but your chest tightens. You physically feel the residual anger hanging in the air, a heavy, suffocating pressure. Society calls you too sensitive. Science calls it a hyperactive mirror neuron system. You are experiencing the edges of mirror touch synesthesia. Today, we're dissecting the neurological reality of the hyper-empathy drain. We will explore how your brain's thin boundary permeability turns you into an emotional sponge, and how this exhausting biological cost is actually the mechanism behind your psychic-level emotional intelligence. By the end, you'll know how to weaponize this empathy to command any room. Let's start with the behavior. You aren't just reading the room, you are biologically simulating it. When you see someone humiliating themselves, you don't just feel bad for them. Your stomach drops. Your heart rate spikes. You look away because the physical discomfort of their embarrassment is agonizing. This isn't metaphorical sympathy. Your anterior insular and anterior cingulate cortex, the brain regions for processing pain, are lighting up as if the humiliation is happening to you. You are catching emotions like a virus. Psychologist Elaine Hatfield labelled this emotional contagion. Your nervous system acts as a highly conductive lightning rod, bypassing conscious thought to instantly mirror the autonomic states of the people around you. Why does this happen? The answer lies in the mirror neuron system. Discovered by Giacomo Rizzolatti, these cells fire both when you perform an action and when you observe it. V.S. Ramachandran calls them empathy neurons. In a neurotypical brain, this allows for basic mimicry. In your brain, this system is hyper-reactive. This borders on mirror touch synesthesia. Your somatosensory cortex possesses structural hyper-excitability. When you witness a tense interaction, your brain's self-other representation barrier dissolves. It mistakenly assumes the external emotional data belongs to you. It pumps cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream to manage a threat that isn't yours, triggering an immediate, unearned stress response. The advantage here is unparalleled pattern recognition. Society thinks you're just a good listener, but you are actually processing high-speed biometric data. Dr. Paul Ekman's research on microexpressions proves human faces flash true emotions for fractions of a second. While others miss these, your sensitive nervous system catches every single one. You notice the pupil dilation, the microtension in the jaw, the shifting breathing patterns. You aggregate this data instantly, delivering it to your conscious mind as intuition. You know what a person feels before they speak. This gives you a terrifyingly accurate, real-time map of human behaviour, making you an undeniable strategic asset in any high-stakes room. But this constant data processing creates a severe biological bottleneck: the hyper-empathy drain. Look at your daily reality. After a networking event, a family gathering, or a trip to a busy store, you are wiped out. You experience an emotional hangover. You feel lethargic, anxious, or inexplicably depressed for days. You might even experience migraines, stomach drops, or chronic fatigue. Society labels you as introverted or antisocial. In reality, you are dealing with profound somatization. Your body is physically breaking down. It is expending massive amounts of metabolic energy trying to process, regulate, and clear chaotic emotional data that never belonged to you in the first place. The clinical framework for this exhaustion is Boundary Permeability by Dr. Ernest Hartman. He found individuals exist on a spectrum of mental boundary thickness. Thick-boundaried people compartmentalize easily. They witness anger and walk away untouched. Their psychological armour is rigid. You, however, possess extraordinarily thin boundaries. Your psychological immune system lacks the membrane to filter out external emotional pathogens. When you encounter a stressed person, their stress seeps through your porous defenses into your nervous system. You lose the ability to distinguish my anxiety from their anxiety. This creates massive allostatic load, the toxic, cumulative biological wear and tear of chronic stress. Yet this lack of psychological armor is exactly why you generate instant, unbreakable trust. Because you lack thick filters, you don't respond to superficial words. You respond to the underlying emotional need. If someone projects arrogance but harbors profound insecurity, you detect the insecurity. By subtly adjusting your tone and posture to soothe that hidden wound, you trigger a massive sense of safety. This is polyvagal theory in action, courtesy of Dr. Stephen Porges. By subconsciously mirroring and validating their hidden state, you signal their autonomic nervous system to downregulate. You deactivate their fight or flight response flawlessly, making them feel profoundly understood without a single explanation. But we must address the dark side of this psychic level EQ, the fawn response. Your ability to read a room flawlessly didn't come from nowhere. For many hyper-empaths, this is an adaptation born of early hypervigilance. If you grew up in an unpredictable environment, your survival depended on microscopic emotional attunement. You learned to detect the tiny shifts in mood that preceded an outburst. You survived by pacifying the threat, intuitively fulfilling their needs before they even asked. Society calls this being a people pleaser. Psychology recognizes it as trauma-induced fawning. Your empathy was forged as a defense mechanism, an internal radar system constantly scanning for hidden emotional landmines. This brings us to the neurological divide destroying your energy. Empathy versus compassion. Neuroscientist Dr. Tanya Singer's fMRI studies prove these are completely different brain states. Empathy is feeling with someone. You jump into the dark water with them. This activates the brain's pain matrix, the insular and mid-cingulate cortex, leading directly to empathic distress fatigue. Compassion is feeling for someone. It involves acknowledging suffering while maintaining a rigid neural boundary. Compassion activates the brain's reward networks, the medial orbitofrontal cortex and ventral striatum. Simply put, empathy is neurologically draining and painful. Compassion is neurologically energizing and resilient. Right now, your brain is entirely stuck in the pain matrix. The ultimate advantage unlocks when you intentionally transition your brain from empathy to compassion. You don't need to destroy your sensitivity. You need to build somatic boundaries. Because your hyperempathy is a physical reflex, cognitive boundaries, like saying, "I won't care," are entirely useless. You must use proprioceptive grounding. When entering a heavy room, forcefully localize sensation to your own physical body, the weight of your feet, the texture of your clothing. This somatic anchor forces your brain to recognize the boundary of the self. It actively shuts down the somatosensory cortex's attempt to simulate the other. You immediately stop acting as a biological sponge and finally start acting as a conscious observer. Once you establish that physical boundary, you reverse the flow of emotional contagion using vagal toning. Hyperempaths usually dysregulate by matching the chaotic frequency of the room. They act as thermometers, reacting to external temperatures. By intentionally stimulating your vagus nerve through slow, diaphragmatic exhalations, you lock your nervous system into a state of profound parasympathetic calm. You become the thermostat. Because human nervous systems constantly seek to co-regulate, the room will unconsciously synchronize to your grounded frequency. Instead of the room's hidden anxiety infecting you, your engineered, unshakable calmness infects the room. You literally hack the biology of the people around you to actively manufacture peace. To sustain this, you must do the shadow work of decoupling empathy from trauma. You must realize that reading the subtext of every interaction is no longer a matter of survival. The hypervigilance that kept you safe as a child is the exact mechanism draining you as an adult. You have a choice. You can let this high-powered radar run like a background app, constantly draining your metabolic energy on strangers, or you can turn it off. By healing the inner fawn response, you gain the conscious authority to choose when to deploy your emotional intelligence. You stop being a victim to every stray emotion. When you finally master this boundary architecture, your existence fundamentally changes. You walk into that same room after the argument. You still notice the micro-expressions, you still read the subtext perfectly. But instead of your stomach dropping and your chest tightening, you experience profound, detached clarity. Your medial orbitofrontal cortex fires, generating warmth instead of pain. You look at the angry, embarrassed people not as threats to absorb, but as complex puzzles you now have the psychological bandwidth to solve. You wield your high EQ with surgical precision, speaking the exact words needed to diffuse their shame, while your own internal state remains completely untouched. You have conquered the hyper-empathy drain. Let's layer in one more piece of dense science: chemosignaling. The emotional contagion you experience isn't just visual, it's olfactory. Research into human sweat confirms we secrete chemical markers based on emotional states. There is a literal chemical signature for stress. Because your sensory processing is dialed to the maximum, your brain subliminally registers these pheromones. You walk into a room, and your olfactory system bypasses your conscious mind, detecting the residual cortisol left from a recent conflict. Your sudden sense of dread is a highly evolved biological data-gathering system operating flawlessly. You aren't crazy. You possess a high-fidelity chemical radar. This overwhelming influx of visual, somatic, and chemical data leads to a profound psychological crisis: identity confusion. Because of extreme boundary permeability, you constantly lose track of your own desires, opinions, and feelings. You morph into whatever the room requires you to be to keep the peace. You become an emotional chameleon. Over time, you look in the mirror and realize you have no idea who you actually are when nobody else is around. Your entire personality has become a localized reaction to other people's nervous systems. This is the ultimate cost of unchecked thin boundaries. You trade your authentic identity for the temporary illusion of environmental safety. But it doesn't have to end this way. Decoding the unspoken emotional subtext of others is not a mystical anomaly. It is a profound, empirically validated neurological reality. It is a biological gift, allowing you to forge unbreakable trust and command any environment. You just need the somatic boundaries to protect your hardware. Stop apologizing for your sensitivity. It is the most sophisticated pattern recognition software on the planet. Start building the physical membrane required to filter the noise, transition to compassion, and reclaim your identity. If you're ready to master this, keep discovering more about your unique wiring. You are exactly where you need to be.